Thomas.
Okay, cool. All righty, team. Thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the Standard Podcast, where we raise the bar, rebuild the culture, and call out the lines no one else will. This isn't motivation. This is a movement. I'm Thomas Rowe, and today I'm joined by my host, Aaron Sarles, and we're getting down with Gini Grimsley, Executive Director of Programming for Pain-Free Performance and a leader in strength and conditioning world. Approaching 2 decades in the industry, Gini is also known for creating cutting-edge performing and introducing approachable, result-driven fitness concepts that transform how athletes train and perform. A former women's basketball player at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, Gini has built her career on helping athletes move better, perform stronger, and build bodies that last beyond their playing days. We're diving into the truth behind what it really takes to build identity, discipline, and legacy in sports and in life. Let's get into it. Awesome. Gini, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Let's start here. You spent nearly 2 decades in strength and conditioning, creating programming that helps athletes perform at their best. What does raising the standard mean to you, especially in the work you've done, pain-free performance, as well as starting as a collegiate athlete?
I think raising the standard to me is about being that resource to others and really setting the example. I think when you raise the standard, there has to be an example that's set. And to be able to do that, you have to hold yourself to a much higher level of accountability. And so as an athlete, as now a working professional and executive, I aspire to be the thing that people strive for, because I know I have my set of peers that I'm hoping also raise the bar for me. So, it's one of those things that it might sound a little cliche, but I feel like the harder I work, the harder it forces others around me to work as well.
Right on. Definitely leading by example for sure. What do you think is the biggest, I hate to use the word lie, what do you think is the biggest misconception that you feel the culture of the fitness industry has sold athletes about training, performance, and how to build a body that lasts?
So I'll start with the first piece, is that the biggest lie that young athletes are sold is that there is a place at the highest level for everyone. And unfortunately, that is not the case. Like, I remember now 25, almost 30 years ago of starting the AAU circuit and playing on a team. We had 1 team per age group. And this was at a time when women's basketball was on the rise, the late 90s, early 2000s. We had 1, maybe 2 sets of uniforms, no bags, no team shoes, like none of this stuff. And there were only 2 teams in the city that I played in. Now, granted, I drove an hour to play for that team, so I wasn't even from the city that I played in, but there were 2 teams for that area. Now, there's 10 teams for that same area. The talent pool is a little bit more diluted, and when somebody gets mad at a coach or an organization, they break off and they start their own. And so now youth sports has become this for-profit thing versus a for-development thing that it was in the past. And you're seeing that these kids are like, well, I don't like where I am now. Let's go to the college level. I don't like where I am now. I'm just going to transfer, use the portal, and take advantage of that, when it doesn't really set them up for future success after sport, because they're not holding themselves accountable to the things that they can control. They're like, well, nothing is in my control. I'm just going to escape this situation and move hopefully to something better. But what they don't realize is that the things that they were struggling with, whether it be on their current club team or current college team, or really, let's go to the adult level, the current job, is that they take themselves with them. They don't leave their old self at their last landing spot. That person comes with you. And if you don't change things about who you are and how you see the world and endure a little bit of hardship, then you don't ever learn anything, and you're not able to do better at what could be your next best landing spot.
No doubt. I mean, that's one of the things that I think when we first met you, we talked about how the transfer portal has become an emergency exit for some athletes, where you and I both know, being a collegiate athlete, you're going to face adversity, you're going to face obstacles, and that's just part of the game. And that's part of your character is overcoming that, right? So how would you say the lie has shown up in your journey from playing basketball at UNC Greensboro to now leading performing and strength and conditioning? And what truth needs to replace that? So how did it show up for you, and how has it changed the way you coach and lead?
Yeah. So I'll take the opposite approach. I didn't have access to the escape portal. It was, nope, you're going to buckle down. You're going to figure out a way to make yourself a contributor to this team versus jumping ship early in the process and then potentially jumping several times. And if you look at the different positions I've held over the years, I haven't been in a role for a year and then left. I haven't taken a job for 6 months and then left because it wasn't the right thing. I did the research ahead of time. I found a space that would stretch me and force me to grow. And I took that to the fullest potential that I can. Now, on the flip side, that lie that you can escape at any time and find something better, that's going to be the thing that trips up a lot of these kids, because once the real world happens, there's not a lot of agility, especially right now in the job market, to say, you know what, I can go out, I can get a different job, I can get a better job. It's like you learn to maximize the potential you have in a role and set yourself up for a promotion or any sort of advancement. Because that lie is the lie is there's always a plan B. But if you don't give yourself a plan B, then it forces you to find new skills and find new ways of doing things so that you become even more of a utility player for whatever job or for whatever industry that you go into.
Right on. Yeah, you're dead on that one. That's awesome. So concludes segment 1. Thanks, Gini. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn you over to Aaron for segment 2, where we're going to talk about identity and legacy.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenny. I appreciate that. So my first question for you, you're known for creating cutting edge, results-driven programming, but beyond workouts and the methods, who is Jenny? And how would you define character, integrity, and discipline?
Yeah. So I think a lot of times, especially in fitness, your identity is tied to your level of fitness. But I think when you zoom out, especially for me, is I like balance. And I've been able to find balance in my career, in now my fitness, in my relationship with my spouse, in the 2 dogs that I own, and that there's not really any one thing that overtakes the others. Like, I can do a lot of things. I have a large capacity for work and for activity and everything outside of that. And I attribute that to being a utility player. Like, I've always been taught to learn how to do a lot of things and be able to always learn how to do even more stuff. And so when it comes to discipline, I look at that as a key to having that freedom and that balance. Like, discipline lends yourself to having a structure, having some routine. And that structure and routine is not restrictive, or it shouldn't be anyway, but it allows you to have the freedom to do things. So if you set your baseline using the idea of discipline, you actually have more freedom than those who are just kind of winging it and figuring it out as they go. And then, I mean, even the integrity and character, I'm a person of my word. If you see me doing something, I'm a firm believer in the body doesn't lie. And the way you do anything is how you do everything. And I know that's, again, a little cliche to say, but I feel like I have invested in the right things. I've invested in things for my body, for my career, and it pays off. If I were to slack off, you would notice it, and that would be the thing that would tell the truth there. So when it comes to my character, part of my job is built into managing this body that I have, but at the same time, that applies to how I do everything else. I'm not going to say that I do this one thing and then do the exact opposite. That doesn't align with my morals and how I would want others to operate with me on an interpersonal level. So
I love that. That's so important. And you nailed it on the head. Like, everything is a reflection of you. And I think we need to hear that message more frequently. I think sometimes we lose that. So my next question for you, you obviously build bodies and for long endurance, pain-free. What does legacy beyond being on the basketball court or for some of the athletes you help, what does that mean to you, and how do you help them long past their playing days?
So I think a lot of athletes get this bad taste in their mouth about having a physical practice. So in college, we had to train. We had to show up for practice. We had to show up for the weight room. We had to show up for conditioning. And those things that we were forced to do made us better on the court. But then when we graduate, and whether you go on to continue on in coaching or move into a regular everyday job or even into executive role, the physical practice never goes away, because I'm a firm believer in that how you treat your body in the gym is going to be the thing that enhances your life outside of the gym. So we're used to doing hard things, and now we don't have the physically hard things, but we reach a certain point once you get out into the working world of like, I need to be able to manage the stress, the mental stress that comes along with work, because we're not going into manual labor jobs for the most part. And it's one of those things. It's like, how can I help people who were high performers at a physical level in the past be now high performers in their career? And I like to call it being an athletic professional. It's finding that competitive fire that you had that made you such a good athlete, and then translating that into what you're able to do in the boardroom, in the office, in the workplace, and aligning that with a physical practice that aligns with the aches and pains that you've accrued over time, maybe some of the injuries that you're having to work around, and relearning an appreciation for that physical practice to then apply it to your now career, not just your athletic career, not just, what once was, but now how can you use that to enhance what you're able to do to make money, support yourself, support your family, and just be a good human and good member of society.
So spot on. You're so right. The behaviors you have around that translate into everything that you do. So with that being said, what's one truth that you wish young athletes or coaches really understood about training and building long-term performance that maybe they haven't heard yet?
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference between training for performance and training for health and longevity. And training for performance means we're chasing these physical outcomes. Our ability to perform on the court is dependent on what we learn and retain in practice, what PRs we hit in the weight room. All of that translates directly to how you perform. Compared to training for health and longevity, these are now things that work within the psychological side, the physiological side, and really when you put those two things together, of the mental game plus supplementing that with the physical game, it, like from a career standpoint, makes a huge difference. But even from a health and longevity standpoint, some of the biggest things that non-athletes deal with is mental health struggle. And the number one thing to address mental health struggles is exercise, because you get the endorphin release, you get increased circulation. Like it kind of in a way takes your mind off some of the issues that you have, because you have to be present and in the moment. And when you look at this, exercise as it relates to health and longevity can be better than most pharmaceuticals when applied with the right dose and the right intensity and the right frequency. And I think when people make that shift of I have to train versus now I get to train, and I get to do it because it enhances what I do in my life, and it helps with some of the aches and pains that I've earned over my years of sport, I think that makes a big difference. And the shift is the thing that's most important. If you never make the shift and you're just okay with being the average person, then you're going to bias towards being more of an average person and less of a high performer. And I think that is the most frustrating piece that athletes will deal with, is that if they don't know where to get that outlet from, they'll shift into just, well, I'm okay at being average at most things now. That's my lot in life. And I think that's underserving what they're capable of doing, because I know a lot of really smart former athletes who can be impactful in the spaces in which they work, and could it be even more impactful if they layered on a little bit more of that physical practice to give them a bigger work capacity.
God, everybody listen to this lady and do what she's telling you to do. Okay. I love this. Thomas, you get to take over now.
Right on. Awesome. All right. We're getting into the next segment 3, advice across all stages. This is a one that I think is so awesome. And that is, we've asked a lot of our other podcast guests, if you could sit down with yourself when you were playing basketball at UNC Greensboro, what advice would you give that version of you about training, performance, and taking care of your body?
Yeah. This is always a tough one. And people have asked me before, like, what are some of the regrets you have about playing college basketball? And my answer is always, I don't have any regrets about any decision that I made during my college career. And I promise I'll answer the question here in just a second. But I want to really emphasize the fact that whatever mistakes you make, you have to learn to live with them, but also learn from them. So yes, you have to deal with the consequences, but if you take a lesson from every single thing, I wouldn't go back and change anything, because I screwed up a lot.
Sure.
And but everything that I screwed up, I only made that mistake once. And so if you're smart, like I wasn't, like I was a good student, but I made some dumb mistakes, and it's like, well, shoot, now you got to go and learn from that. And it teaches you resilience. Now, would I go back and say, you know what, Jenny, maybe eating Chick-fil-A every day was not the answer, or, sleeping between classes in the locker room on a very uncomfortable couch versus, maybe going and getting a better lunch than the Chick-fil-A? Yeah, probably. But I enjoyed my time in the weight room. I probably would tell myself to be a little bit more vocal. Like, that's one of the things I've learned through moving through the corporate world is I feel like I'm a much better leader now at almost 40 than I was at 18 or 20. And you're probably like, well, yeah, duh. There's a little bit of a gap between those two age groups. But I've learned over the years to speak up when needed, to say the thing that needs to be said, not just sit on it. Like, as an 18-year-old, I'm like, yeah, that's your problem, not mine, versus, no, this is our problem. How are we going to work through this together? And being that leader that I think my team needed, especially my junior and senior year, after we had some really strong players graduate, some really strong personalities graduate, like, I should have been the one to step up. So looking back, it's like, hey, younger Jenny, let's sit down and talk. And here's the thing. You need to speak up. You know exactly what to do. You're going to go do the work, but now how do you get your teammates who are starting to stray and do some crazy stuff, bring them all back together? And so if I could go back and say, hey, you need to learn to be the glue, that's what I would go back and have that conversation about.
Right on. Yeah, that totally makes sense, because I think it's a book by John Maxwell. You win some, you learn some, right? You can't look at anything as a loss. You just have to look at it as a learning lesson. And what about what you got out of basketball? What about when you first started in strength and conditioning? What would you tell yourself then about building programs and helping athletes?
Yeah, so that one's unfortunately it's a little bit easier to answer. Like, I didn't know jack. I knew enough to pass the certification exam and enough to be dangerous. And so I spent a lot of time just kind of working and learning anecdotally, and looking back, had I taken the time, spent a little bit more money on going and getting continuing education, it would have accelerated my career. I would have met more people. But at the same time, I'm on my own journey. I'm at a place now where if there's a CEU event I want to go do, I go do it. But as a young, right out of grad school, like trying to make a difference and help athletes of any age at that point, it's like, all right, I know the fundamentals work, but then what's the nuance that goes along with it? And I think these young coaches and trainers, I mean, I'll throw myself into that bucket as well as a young coach and trainer at the time. Like I didn't know what I didn't know, and I thought I knew a lot. When in reality, looking back now, it's the full Dunning-Kruger effect of looking back and saying, geez, I didn't know anything, but I thought I knew everything that needed to happen. And then investing in learning. Like I read whatever free stuff I could get my hands on. I read textbooks. I read all of that. But actually going and interacting and being able to ask questions and be questioned, I think would have given me a much more solid base to work from.
Right on. Right on. That means that now that you're coaching 2 decades in the industry, what's the one thing you're trying to make sure athletes and coaches understand that you had to learn the hard way or taking the long road?
I think learning never stops. Like as an athlete, as now a coach, now as an executive, it's you're constantly learning, you're constantly looking for that new idea, but it can't trump what you have proven to be successful in the past. And so working from a principle-based approach allows you to create things that align with your vision of how the world should be, or at least your business and your interest in it, and then go and find things that align with that. And so it's, could you go and try to absorb everything? Yes, but that might be a waste of time because it doesn't apply directly to what you are trying to do once your career is over. Because at some point for all of us, that career is going to end. And then what? So hopefully you've done some planning, but also you know what you would like to do, and it'll materialize if you are able to create that vision and then know what those next steps are.
Right on. Right on. Well, team, you can obviously tell by the pounding in the back that Gini is in high demand. I'm going to turn over the last segment to Aaron, where he's going to attack you with the fire round.
I promise I won't attack you. Gosh, but we are going to have fun. This is my favorite segment. It's our rapid fire round. So I'm going to say a statement, and Ginny, I just want you to finish it for me, okay?
Okay.
So discipline equals
freedom.
Leadership equals
accountability.
Faith equals
process.
Legacy equals
pride.
What's one thing you'd never compromise on?
Definitely not going to compromise on my integrity.
And what's one message, if you could put it up on a billboard for the next generation, what would that be?
It's not all about you. Create a network. Yep, create a network.
I love that. It's not all about you, kids. Listen up. Take that advice. That's awesome.
Awesome. All right, Gini, as we close out here, before we wrap up, is there something we didn't touch on today that you feel athletes, parents, coaches, or fitness professionals need to hear about training, performance, and building bodies that last?
I mean, we obviously touched on a lot. I think the thing is really making that shift, and that training your body trains your mind. And if you can learn to do hard things physically, it makes the hard mental struggle in everyday life that much easier. And it's not as complicated as a lot of people make it out to be. I live in a very interesting corner of Instagram, and it's like, oh my gosh, if this is what my world is like, then I've got, I'm doing okay. But then I step outside of that silo and it's like, oh no, that's not actually how the world is. And, it's one of those things. Fitness doesn't have to be complex and it doesn't have to be complicated. There are so many variables that can be adjusted to meet you where you are, and then find a way to get to maintenance. And, for fitness professionals, you want to train these former athletes like athletes. They're not. They're now desk jockeys. They're sitting for 8 to 12 hours a day. They're not on their feet 8 to 12 hours a day. This is a completely different body than what you think they were even last year. And so helping make that shift and bridge that gap is the piece that you need to consider. And then for the former athletes, it's like, just go move your body. You'll feel a lot better, and you'll feel like you still have a little bit of an edge. Just being weird random pickup games.
Right on. Well, where can people connect with you and learn more about who you are, your philosophy, and pain-free performance?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is an easy one to connect with on the professional side. I'm on there and relatively active. And then Instagram and Facebook, follow me. I'll give you a follow back. You can just type in my name. It's probably the easiest. I've made my Instagram handle very complicated. But yeah, I'm sure these guys will put it in the show notes. But yeah, give me a follow. I'm active on both of those. And yeah, I present all over the place for different organizations. So if I'm in a town near you, let's connect, grab a workout and some fellowship as former athletes.
Right on. So now we're going to get down to the serious nuts and bolts. What are your top 3 sports films of all time?
Oh my God. Sports films. Let's see. Hoosiers.
Yeah.
There's going to be a basketball theme here. White Men Can't Jump. And then I will catch all hell if I don't include this one, Love and Basketball, because that was the basketball movie of my generation. So
Totally. That was an awesome one. Well, thanks so much, team. Thanks, Gini, for sharing your story. If this conversation challenged you, inspired you, or made you think differently, do 2 things for us. 1, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. An athlete's dealing with pain or injury, a coach building a better training program, a fitness professional who wants to help athletes perform at their best, or 2, connect with Gini on social media and we'll drop in the show notes, we'll drop in her where you can get a hold of her, and then go ahead and reach out. If you're serious about training smarter, moving better, and building that body that lasts, Gini is leading the way. If you're an athlete, parent, or coach ready to raise your standard, check out Blueprint to Blue Chip at blueprintbluechip.com. We help athletes build identity, discipline, and legacy that goes beyond the game. If you're ready to get clear on who you are behind the game, join us for a 3-day reset win-play show at blueprintbluechip.com. It's designed for athletes who are ready to rebuild their foundation. And if this episode resonated with you, take 30 seconds and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It helps us reach more athletes, parents, and leaders who need this message. Talent fades, but truth endures. Raise the bar, rebuild the culture, become the standard, and we'll see you next time. Again, Gini, thanks so much. Aaron, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.